By the time my father made the call, I had 31 employees. He didn't know that. That's the part worth understanding first, before anything else. Not as strategy, not as setup, but as plain fact. He simply didn't know because I had never told him. And I had never told him because somewhere along the way I had stopped needing him to know things in order for them to be real. The hospital corridor was the kind that absorbs sound badly. Vinyl floors, low ceilings, the particular echo of a place that runs 24 hours and never quite settles. I had stepped outside his room to get coffee from the machine down the hall. When I came back, the door was pulled mostly closed and I could hear him on the phone. His attorney. I recognized the cadence of it. The way my father spoke when he was being precise and official and considered himself to be handling something. I stood there with a paper cup of bad coffee and I listened. He went through it methodically. The property on Carver Road, the investment accounts, the stake in the supply company he'd built in the 80s and still considered his finest achievement. My brother Derek's name appeared after each one, cleanly, like a signature on a document that had been drafted long before this phone call. My name appeared once, near the end, attached to a savings bond from 1987. I drank my coffee. I waited until he finished. Then I went back in and sat in the chair beside his bed, and we watched 20 minutes of a golf tournament together without speaking, which was honestly not so different from most visits. My father was not a cruel man. I want to be careful about that because the easier version of this story makes him a villain, and he wasn't. He was a man who had decided, sometime when Derek and I were still young, which of us understood the world the way he understood it. Derek was decisive, loud in the right rooms, comfortable with risk in the way that reads as confidence to people who confuse the two. My father saw himself in that. It wasn't malicious. It was just a story he'd chosen early and never revised. I was the one who read contracts carefully, who asked questions before committing, who took 3 years longer than Derek to finish school because I changed direction twice and needed to get it right. My father called this hesitation. I called it accuracy. We never resolved that disagreement. The business started because a problem existed that I could see and no one was solving. Logistics software for mid-size regional manufacturers. Specific, unsexy, necessary. I used savings, then a small loan from a credit union, then revenue, in that order. I did not mention it at Sunday dinners, not once in 6 years. Part of that was stubbornness. Part was self-protection, the knowledge that his interest would arrive wrapped in suggestions, in the assumption that his experience in his industry translated cleanly to mine. But the larger part, the part I've sat with honestly since, was simpler. I didn't want his approval in the foundation of it. I wanted to know it could stand without that. By the hospital visit, it was standing. The profile in the trade publication ran on a Thursday, 14 days after I sat in that corridor. I had been interviewed months earlier and forgotten the exact publication date. The timing was not planned. These things rarely are. My father called on Saturday morning. The conversation was short. He asked why I hadn't told him. I said I hadn't needed to. He said that wasn't an answer. I said it was the only one I had. There was a long pause, and then he said something about Derek, something that was almost an explanation, and I told him I understood, which was true, and that it was fine, which was partially true, and we hung up. Derek called Sunday. That conversation was harder and more honest, and we stayed on the phone for 40 minutes. He knew he'd been handed something he hadn't built. He didn't pretend otherwise. I didn't know what to do with his decency about it, so I just let it be there. I did not contest the estate. What my father was dividing had stopped representing what I needed sometime in the last 6 years, quietly, without ceremony. I couldn't have named the exact moment. It didn't arrive as a decision. It arrived as a fact I noticed one day, the way you notice the heat has finally gone out of an old argument. I get to the office before anyone else most mornings. Not from ambition exactly, more from habit, from preference for the hour before the day has any demands in it. I make coffee with the good machine and sit at my desk and go through numbers that are mine, built from a problem I identified and a solution I developed, and 31 people who showed up because the work was worth showing up for. My father has not seen the office. I haven't decided yet whether to invite him. Some mornings that feels like power. Some mornings it just feels like distance. Most mornings I finish my coffee and get to work, and the question waits patiently for another day.